I don't change companies all that often. I do need to be very intentional about what's a good next company. I literally wrote what I call a reverse job description. It was a one-pager. This is what I'm looking for. This is how I know, how I'll know it when I see it.
Welcome back to Product Leader's Journey. I am your host, Rahul Abhyankar, and you were just listening to Fred Koopmans, Chief Product Officer of BigPanda, and my guest today. Fred goes into details about what is a reverse job description and how he goes about writing one. We cover other interesting topics as well, the different labels we assign to companies, engineering-led, sales-led, and what to do in these types of environments. It's a fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. Hope you will too. Let's jump in. Fred, welcome to Product Leader's Journey. I'm really excited to have you on the show and really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Rahul. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to spend some time with you.
Chief Product Officer at BigPanda, and BigPanda is an AIOps company. So I'd love to get that perspective of the flavor of conversations that you're having with customers around AI.
Yeah, great. Happy to dive in there. Before we get to the customer conversation, let me tell you a little bit about BigPanda. Like, what does AIOps mean?
Mm-hmm.
At every large enterprise, there's sort of hidden somewhere a NOC, an incident management team, a support team, L1, L2, L3.
Yeah.
That's a really hard job in today's world, like multi-cloud and microservices and CI/CD. Like, engineering's throwing everything they could possibly throw at these teams. Well, they need a tool, they need data, they need AI to help streamline all of that.
Yeah.
So this was like the thesis of the company, but that thesis wasn't like born in November of 2022 when ChatGPT came out. This was like 2013, 2014. Honestly, ahead of the market.
Yeah.
The vision was AI ops, but the technology was not that advanced. And, I joined in 2021 and I was like, all right, so how's the AI work? And they're like, well, we got some prototypes over here and we got some experiments and some ideas, but mostly what customers are using today is this sort of elegant rules-based engine, because there's a lot more trust in the rules that they can see and control and explain. And don't forget, these are IT people. They like to know how it all works. They don't like black box kind of magic things that they can't explain. So that's kind of what our customers are actually using. I was like, okay, well, we might be over marketing it a little bit or underdeveloping, but let's worry about that later. Okay. And then I kind of dove in and got to work. And, a year later, ChatGPT did come out, and that was like an iPhone moment for the whole industry, and especially for someone who had been marketing themselves and building towards a vision of AI ops. All of a sudden, the technical barriers just plummeted. So very exciting. Now, what I've learned is just because you're very excited about your technology and your AI and how cool it is, doesn't necessarily mean that the customer is going to throw money at you. I think one of my favorite quotes from top 5 bank, my customer, longtime customer, and I was doing a kind of a roadmap interlock session with them.
Okay.
Here's my roadmap. What's your roadmap? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I asked him, he explained his roadmap, and he never talked about AI. Talked about all kinds of other projects, but not AI. I was like, hey, you didn't mention AI. What's your AI strategy? And he kind of smiles a little bit, and I'm like, uh-oh, let me get ready. He goes, my AI strategy is to make sure that vendors don't double my price for no added value just because they have AI now.
Interesting.
I was like, oh, snap. Okay. We've reached that point already where there's some concern over hype and different kinds of things. So they're excited about AI, but it's new. Just kind of like when the cloud came out, not that there was quite a singular moment when cloud came out, but everyone was like, are we allowed to use cloud? Do we have a strategy? Do I need to get permission for this thing? We're going through these sorts of questions. You have to go through a whole crossing the chasm thing. Let's go find a couple of visionaries that have enough influence in their organization to just drive something to completion. Somebody's got to go first. You got to find those people and just keep working, just kind of keep working up that hill. So we've made a ton of progress. That's kind of how it's gone. On the customer side, my goodness, I still get a mix of, I'd appreciate if you used the words AI a little less in this meeting, right? It's kind of a skeptical IT kind of buyer and user, and we're not sure about that or why does that matter, all the way to someone that really wants to geek out and like, well, how does it work and
Right.
what's the technology and tell me more. So it's quite a spectrum. It's a tricky thing to navigate there because you don't always
Yeah.
know what kind of your customer is, but know your audience as best you can is probably good advice.
You mentioned the iPhone moment, and what that struck me is when I look at your career progression, it's fascinating in terms of not just the types of roles that you've held from QA all the way to chief product officer, but also the types of companies that you worked in. And there is this theme that emerges to me, which is riding the right wave at the right time. So when I look at Bytemobile, that's like optimization for wireless networks, then video, Citrix, and then cloud platforms, data platforms, and now AI. So each of these have been significant waves of technology, and you've been at the right wave at the right time. So tell me about how you've managed to surf these waves or even identify these
Mm.
waves.
A mix of luck and some intentionality for sure.
Okay.
So I'll say that I'm a bit of an oddity in Silicon Valley this day and age because my whole career I've been at 4 companies. I average more than 5 years per company, and that's
Yeah.
unheard of. My wife is literally like 4x that number. But what I really enjoy is like kind of grabbing onto a thing and then really seeing where it goes. Like, let's see what the next chapter is. And as long as I'm progressing and the market's progressing, we haven't stalled out.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily eager to jump off. I don't get bored quickly. I have a lot of
Mm.
stick to itness. To answer your question, so I joined Bytemobile because I graduated in 2002, and yeah, the mobile internet was taking off, but the economy was also not in a great spot. There weren't a lot of job
Mm.
offerings. But my research group at the University of Illinois had started this company a couple of years ago, and well, I don't know, startups sound fun in California. It was kind of it was about how thoughtful I was about it. And yeah, the internet, mobile internet sounds good too. So I joined there, and I kind of started off like you said in QA.
Yeah.
There was no quality, there's no enterprise readiness. So when
Mm.
I joined, thought I was joining the development team. They're like, nope, you're going over to QA. We need to like up level and create enterprise readiness for this product. And it was kind of like a 6-month boot camp, health checks and load balancing
Yeah.
and active and all these sorts of things. Like, they didn't
Yeah.
teach me about that in school, but I guess that probably matters too. And my first 5 years was that, and we had saturated the market. We were like,
Mm.
what do we do next? Like, we can't really sell any more of this. Like, we have this really cool product. It delivers incredible performance gain. But
Yeah.
still, these 2G networks of the time, they were empty. Like, nobody
Right.
was
Yeah.
buying a mobile data plan in
Exactly.
2007 because the devices weren't good and it was still too slow. And then something magical for that particular business happened, and that was that the iPhone came out,
Yeah. Yeah.
YouTube came out,
Yeah.
3G came out, and unlimited data plans.
Yeah.
And
Perfect
within,
storm.
I don't know, like 18 months, you went from empty 2G networks to
Right.
completely congested 3G networks. Our CTO had a little pocket of engineers who had been like incubating on something that only a year or two earlier were like, what are they doing over there?
Yeah.
What's that for? This sort of video transcoding kind of a thing. We grabbed that. We built a video optimization product, and that was like this breakout moment for that company. So we didn't see that wave coming. We
Hmm.
responded to it. We'd been investing in some research, not knowing if that was going to pay off. But there was a thing in the right place, right time, and we just rode that wave. We went all in on it. Like, video optimization is the thing. You
Yeah.
know, I remember writing a slide. I was copying Bill Clinton, like, it's the economy, stupid. I was like, it's video. If any of your accounts ask you about some of these other random features, talk about video because we're going all in on video, and that's where the customer should be going too.
Yeah.
So
Fascinating.
that was a great moment. Now I'll fast forward a little bit. I did leave. That company was shortly thereafter acquired by Citrix. That video
Mm.
product kind of helped drive that. It's been a few years there at Citrix. Had gone from engineering to architect for that video product, and then product management. And I was running
Hmm.
the business units portfolio of products there for a few years. So I was like, okay, it's time for something new, and I didn't want to hear the words mobile, video, or any of that. Like, again, like, life's too short to go do the same thing. So I wanted
Yeah.
to be super thoughtful about what is the next thing. And big data was a thing. Open
Yeah.
source was becoming much more of a thing. I decided to go join Cloudera, and I
Hmm.
was
Okay.
looking to capture data, open source, and cloud. I spent 5 years there. Very interesting and exciting. There, the technology was amazing. and the people were amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but the business strategy and some of the product management processes were underdeveloped. There was a lot of room
Okay.
for kind of improvement and driving alignment between the field and the customers. How do you listen to the customers? How do you create more forums for that? So it was like, okay, 5 years of like PhD in product management was really kind of what my experience was like. I don't change companies all that often. I do
Yeah.
need to be very intentional about what's a good next company. I literally wrote what I
Mm-hmm.
call a reverse job description. It was a one pager. This is
Okay.
what I'm looking for. This is how I'll know it when I see it. And I told everybody. Every recruiter was like, hey, we're thinking about, like, here's my reverse job description. Tell me if you find one of these. And of course, I tweaked it
Interesting.
and I changed it and I iterated on it, but I was very intentional about it. And at the time, I was like, I have to catch another wave.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I was considering, like kind of green economy. There was a couple other candidates, but AI was sort of the leading one, and it
Yeah.
took a while. But I found the right company, and then that was it.
Fascinating. This aspect of the reverse job description. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, how did you structure your thinking and putting that down on paper? I would love to see it if you have a copy of that reverse job description
Uh,
from a few years ago.
I do. I do. I don't know how to share my screen right now. Otherwise,
Oh,
I'll
we'll
send it
get
to you
it.
afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so it was like, okay, what am I looking for? Very simple. Good company, good product, big
Yeah.
impact. And then I had some questions around company stage. So let's start with company, good company. So for me, what that meant was big market with tailwinds. And it's like I've had a big market with headwinds. I've had a small market with tailwinds, and I was like, hey, dummy, like you need both of those
Mm,
things to,
yeah.
for your next job. Something early enough that there was a lot of growth ahead of it, 10x kind of growth opportunity, not for the whole company, at least sort of my line of business inside of that. And it certainly wasn't going to be another on-prem company pivoting to the
Mm,
cloud. Like life's too short to do that again. Like I'm not going to get hired by the kids if I keep kind of get associated with on-prem companies.
right.
And I did want, like remote workforce is a thing. Obviously, this is mid-pandemic. I was looking, but I wanted some leadership in the Bay Area. I want to be part of a
Mm,
team, not just an individual. I don't want to be the one person on this side of the planet. So that's good company for me. Good product. Okay, so good product was as in product-led growth,
mm-hmm.
meaning something that doesn't require an enormous amount of sales and marketing. Good product means some form of societal benefit, um, something that can like easily, very directly explain to my mother, to my kids, like, oh, I'm
Mm,
doing this, and this is what my whole company is about, and it's not just
yeah.
whatever making money. And then most important is it's got to fit me. Like I am who I
Yeah.
am. I'm not a gamer. I'm not going to go work on gaming. I'm not going to build the best product for developers these days. It's been a long time
Yeah.
since I've been a developer, so I kind of it needs to fit me and my capabilities.
Mm,
And then big impact. So big, what does that mean? So early enough that some really important decisions are still ahead of it. It's not like you've made all
okay.
of those and you've kind of made your bed, now you got to lie in it kind of a thing. It's like, no, I wanted to have the opportunity to contribute and think through all of that. Like multi-horizon business planning and challenging was a big thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I realized, I'd actually been coached on this a few years back, was even if you're not really sure where you want to be in 5 years, it's not okay to not have an answer to that. Like you got to have an answer.
Okay.
You've got to say, look, I'm going to be an X, and here's my path to get there.
Mm,
And like any roadmap, like it's a roadmap. I don't know, it's a
right.
plan. It might change. It might not be exactly that, but if you're running product, you can't say, "Oh, I don't have a roadmap.
Right.
I don't have a
Yeah.
plan of where I'm going to be in 5 years." No, you got to have one. So what I said is like, look, I want to be either the GM of a billion
Mm-hmm.
dollar business inside of a large company, or I want to be CEO of a smaller company.
Okay.
And that actually like connects quite well with just my overall path of kind of always going upstream,
Mm-hmm.
getting closer and closer to the heart of the business. So, um, I'm a couple years in, and I still think that's the right goal. Actually, I think that was a good roadmap for me.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the big impact. Now, here's the one thing I didn't know. do I want to do this in a smaller size company, a medium sized company, or a large company? Because all of those are possible, right? You could
Right.
go be a GM in training at a hyperscale public company. I could go be a CPO in training at like the latest decacorn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or I could go be, the top job from a product perspective, CPO at that stage, probably a Series C to E kind of stage company is
Mm-hmm.
where I was at. And, I needed something clever here to help the recruiters and myself remember these things. So I called them whales, sharks, and piranhas. Um,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
then, like
Can you
like I said
explain
before,
that a
like
little bit? Yeah.
they did piranhas being the post product market fit
Mm.
Series C to E companies, the sharks being the next decacorns, and the whales being the giant ones.
Mm.
It's like, okay, well, I don't know what I want. Like, there's some things I know what I want. These are my non-negotiables, but here's a
Yeah.
couple of, like, I want to try a few things out. And then I interviewed. Let me go interview with a few whales, a few sharks, a few piranhas, see what feels good.
Right.
Kind of got turned off as I talked to the whales,
Mm.
and the sharks weren't hiring at that time. Like, they were like, we're good. I didn't get a whole lot of opportunities there. But the piranhas is what really spiked my curiosity. I go meet with the CEO
Okay.
of Piranha for a couple of hours, and I would either have absolutely no interest in that business,
Yeah.
or my mind would kind of explode with questions and ideas and experiments and things I want to try, and I would fill like a couple of sheets of notebook paper
Mm.
with exciting things. And like at some point after that happened, like the third or the fourth time, I was like, okay, like your body's telling you something. It's telling you the
Yeah.
piranhas is the path to go. And then like talk to everybody, every single recruiter. Like once I decided I'm looking, I'm like, okay, I'm taking every single phone call and I'm sending them my reverse job description. I want them to work for me. And some of them would
Mm.
come back with like, hey, I found a thing that sounds just like what you said. I'm like, great, thank you. Like, what's
Yeah.
that about? That's kind of how it worked.
And when you join a company, um, people who are already there, or people you are trying to recruit, or people on your team, generally ask you the question, "Why did you come to Big Panda?" Like, what made you make that decision?
A lot of people, like, what are common answers around this kind of thing? Like the people, the
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
or my buddy had just joined, things like that.
Right.
Um, Honestly, my hack is I just pull up the reverse job description and I'm like, well, literally on the screen, like
Interesting.
this is what I was looking for. And once I decided what I was looking for, it took me a while, but then I found Big Panda. Well, it turns out Big Panda was looking for exactly the same thing.
So when we kind of step back, we hear these things about companies being engineering led, sales led, product led. How do you think about these labels? What do they mean? And if I'm a product manager listening to our conversation, how do I orient myself to an environment that is one of these three: engineering, sales, or product led? But let's focus on engineering led and sales led. And how do I still be effective in that environment?
A lot about this. So Bytemobile, if I look back, I think that was pretty engineering-led company. Like the founders were all engineers. It was a couple of
Yeah.
professors and a bunch of grad students dropped out, created a company. Like all of the technology was born and invented, and that they ended up being the leaders of that company. Now the reality is, it was they also turned into business leaders and product managers. Like that was my transition into product management. So there was kind of
Yeah.
like an imbalance, if you will. There was sort of weaker product management and very strong engineering. It
Uh-huh.
wasn't necessarily a feature that it was led that way. Like I would have loved very strong product management. We would have done better things along the way, I think. Citrix, I found, was very sales led. They
Mm.
had the power ultimately. You could build whatever you wanted in
Mm.
product, but if you couldn't convince sales to sell it, then they were going to de-invest in your sales team, and like that was kind of a different experience.
Yeah.
Cloudera was engineering led, almost community led. That was like the weirdest thing. It was like the
Mm.
a lot of my engineers actually had more affinity with their Apache community than with the company. At least when I first joined, I'm like, well, this
Hmm.
is hard to manage. How do I
Interesting.
influence that? So that was interesting. And then Big Panda, I think, was sales led kind of prior to me joining, and like you'd kind of tell the customer whatever they wanted to hear was a
Yeah.
little bit more common, and we need to rein that in. So I think back about it. Here's my conclusion. If somebody says, hey, that company or this company is blank led,
Yeah.
that's code for this company, it's dysfunctional, or it's still like work in progress. You're kind of saying that division has too much power, or you're saying that division is the only one carrying their weight, and everybody else is like not keeping up, right? They're B players or C players or something like
It's an
that.
indication of how decisions are being made in that company.
Yeah, I think the best run companies would actually reject that question. And everybody, every division would reject that question of like, are you engineering led or sales led? They'd be like, what are you talking about? We're aligned. We're all strong players and we're aligned. We're not quote unquote, we're like, I don't know, CEO led or something like that. Having said all of that, I think those are just labels. Right? Like you asked questions like, how would you kind of advise a product manager? At the end of the day, their role is the same regardless of C-suite kind of politics that might be going on. You got to define where we're going, get alignment across the whole company on where we're going, and make sure that people bought into that. And if people didn't have an opportunity to participate in that decisioning process, truly, right, not just performative participation, real participation, they're not going to get bought in to where you're going, and you're going to have divisions and silos and fractured thinking. And, well, this wasn't my idea, this was just what engineering wanted. You got to get rid of all that stuff, and that's the job, right? And then, okay, turn that into a strategy and a roadmap to get there, and step-by-step releases. There's more work that kind of comes downstream, but at the core of it, like, define where you're going, get alignment around that. Now, like, if you accept that as your definition, I'll say that can happen in many departments. That could be someone in engineering whose job that is, or who plays that role. I'll put it that way. In my view, they're actually the product managers. So you occasionally hear this, especially like on the consumer side, like what do product managers do anyways? And like there's like running jokes and memes about, I'm assuming consumer product managers of like they have no purpose or something like that. It's like, well, time out. Whoever it is that's deciding where you're going, that's the product manager. You might have someone else that actually has that title who's like doing downstream work, like creating decks and pricing and stuff, but someone's deciding where you're going. Somebody's figuring out how to take technology and convert that into a business strategy, or you're not, and you're just building technology, but you're not building a business. In other words, you have no path to revenue on that. And I've seen that pattern, and sometimes those are the companies that like ridicule product managers. I'm like, but who is deciding how you're going to make money? What market, what customer, what pain are you going after? Is that pain worthwhile? Do you have a route to market? What's your distribution channel? All that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It's a very loaded question when someone says we're blank led or whatever. It's like, okay, let's talk about dysfunction first. What team needs to be up leveled, if any, and then you can kind of get to more of these particulars.
No, what you said is really interesting there in terms of somebody is making the decision in terms of where we are going, how we are going to get there, how those decisions are being made, who is making those decisions, and you happen to be a product manager with that title in that environment, then you have to figure out how do you earn a seat at that table, become credible with the aspects of product management that you described that you need to do very well and ensure that people see that.
Absolutely. And I think like I said it earlier, I kind of glossed over this. I said, hey, you have to define where we're going. Well, how do you do that? 2 ways. You can come up with the idea, or you can find the idea and write it down. You don't have to have all the good ideas. In fact, you probably won't have all the good ideas all the time, even if you think you do. There's going to be really good ideas sitting out there in your engineering team, in your customer support team, your PS, your pre-sales, your customers, your competitors. There's good ideas all over the place if you're looking for them. So your job as the product manager is to collect those ideas, bring them all in, do some form of prioritization and turn 1,000 disparate good ideas into a well thought through strategy and write it down. That's actually what I mean by define the destination, is to do all that stuff. And to be perfectly candid, like if I don't come up with any of the good ideas, great, less work, right? And everyone else feels incredibly bought in because they saw their good ideas come into your thing. So when I'm working on a project like this, I'm actually looking for, every time that somebody says something like, oh, that's good, and I'll pull that word, even if it was my idea, but like they had a better word than I did, I'll pull it in and I'll let them see me adopt that word. And now they are so much more bought into where you're going. And that sounds a little like, I don't know, nefarious or something. I don't mean it that way, but like your job is to collect the ideas, the words, the ideas, all that, and then put it all together and then be like, hey, company, here's step one, step two, step
Yeah.
three, here's why, here's how we're going to do this, and you've rationalized it.
Yeah, no, I don't see it as nefarious or manipulative in that sense, but it's just an aspect of putting yourself in the stream, putting yourself in the flow of ideas, and then catching the right,
Yep.
things that are coming in that flow. Beautiful. So, Fred, you've had significant experience as, in engineering organizations, QA, engineer, engineering manager, architect, and then product management. So you have a great perspective on maybe two things. One is, what is it that engineers wish product managers know? And maybe conversely, what do product managers wish that engineers know?
Good question. What does engineers wish that product managers would know? I think I've seen this happen before where the engineers would wish that the product managers know how to demo the product. And they'll
Mm,
see the product manager working in slides,
mm,
working in Jira, working in like collaborative docs, but not the product.
mm,
And I find if you really want to gain the respect of the engineers, use the product, learn how to demo, be the best
yeah,
person to go demo. That comes incredibly natural for some people and some products.
yeah.
That's actually incredibly hard for others with their products. I actually had that. I did 3 years in at Cloudera. We were launching a new product. We had just merged with Hortonworks. I
Mm-hmm.
did a deep 360. So I took like 3 people on my team, 3 executives at the company, 3 of my peers.
Okay.
Tell me what you think. And I had a coach that came and did this for me. One of the big pieces of feedback, a lot of slides, not a lot of demos.
Mm,
Not sure if he's technical enough.
okay.
And I was like, I have a graduate degree, 4.0, and what are you talking about? I'm not technical enough. Like, let me show you how technical I can be. But they were
Yeah.
right. I wasn't demoing. I was always in PowerPoint. So I
Mm,
took off that hat and I changed my stripes on that. And I was like, okay, I need to go demo. And 6 months later, like completely different kind of story. So
yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things. Like appreciate my product, use my product, give me feedback, but not just based on how you're marketing it. Be more technical, be more hands-on. The other direction, I think product managers want their engineers to have strong opinions about like where this thing should go. Don't just be
Mm,
beholden to the product manager to like spoon feed every idea. Get curious yourself. Get curious and go meet the customer. Like,
mm,
I wonder how sales pitches this product. I wonder how they're demoing. I wonder how they run trials. I wonder how does the customer respond? I think these 3 features are like incredible, but what does the customer think? That was my path to
yeah.
product management. This wasn't an intentional path. Like I
Mm,
just got curious and I suspected that maybe my product management, my sales team might not be positioning it as good. They weren't going to
mm,
sell it as well as I could go sell what that thing
mm,
was. And it turns out I was right. So as I got into that room, my expertise just gravitated towards that. But it started from a position of curiosity and like, well, let me go meet the customer and let me
yeah.
figure out how to get them excited. Of course, I fumbled over my words many times. I always remember a sales leader in a meeting once, selling an upgrade. It was kind of an apology for having like destabilized their network for a little while
Mm,
at a major US operator.
okay.
I was talking about how cool the technology was. I was like, this is bleeding edge technology. It's
Yeah.
really cool. You should be excited about it, something like that. And the customer goes like, I don't want to be on the bleeding edge. You know what happens there?
Yeah.
You get cut. Like, I'm going to lose my job if you ever do anything like that again. And my sales leader was like, I love the technology, Fred, but like, let's keep that whole cutting edge thing to ourselves and we'll just talk
Mm,
about that in all hands. We don't have to say that out to customers. It's like, okay, I am maturing. I am growing. I'm learning that's a lot more than just technology
yeah.
that creates this partnership with this long-term enterprise customer. They need to trust you. Trust that like, your upgrades are going to work. If you talk about a need that they have, you're going to kind of follow through on it. It's a lot more than the tech, but I wouldn't have known that if I just stayed coding all day.
Yeah. No, you talked about those are great stories, by the way. But you talked about the relationship, the partnership that you create with customers. And a little while ago, you also talked about seeing your customer get promoted in their careers, right? How do you build that personal relationship with a customer to be able to understand what's going to move them forward in their career within their organization and really forge that personal individual level partnership that you talked about?
You can't do that in Zoom calls like with an internal meeting and a different customer meeting like right before and right after, right? You got to
Yeah.
like go get in their environment and understand what's at stake for them. Like,
Mm.
hey, like if this goes really well, what happens?
Mm.
I'm going to get my bonus. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to get my bonus. Like, oh, okay, that matters. Like, okay, this is an industry where bonus is a big thing,
Yeah.
or I'm up for promotion, or I'm whatever. So kind of understanding what motivates them, what solves them, what are they solving for, and then also just look, you got to do what you say. Make a
Mm.
commitment. Say something bold, like I will fix this for you. I might not write the code myself, but I will make sure this thing gets fixed. And they're like, okay, I see you. I see what you're doing there. Go solve my problem. Then you got to go solve it. Hey
Mm.
guys, I committed to Troy that I'm going to fix this thing. We've got to get this done. You can kind of
Yeah.
rally your team around that. And they're like, oh, they all want that customer to be successful. And you earn a lot of credibility by doing that. And here's my number. Here's my mobile number. And then see if you can like get a text message relationship. I always want to have a couple customers I have like a text message relationship with
Yeah.
where they can text me anytime. Like I just pretend like I work for your company. If you can build that level of trusted
Interesting.
advisor relationship, well, interesting things can happen. Next thing you know, they're like, hey, have you ever heard of this vendor? We're thinking about doing a thing. And like, well, I've never heard of them, but like I know a buddy who works there. You want an intro or like
Yeah.
whatever. Just like allow it to go somewhere a little more connected than just your sort of I'm the product manager at this vendor and you're my customer and it's very like kind of controlled. Like open it up.
Yeah. That's powerful. Pretend like I work for your company. That's just amazing.
Yeah. And like look, if your incentives are aligned, that is what you're doing. Right. And if they come to you with this idea, you need to be able to say, that's a fantastic idea. I hear this adjacent vendor does it really well. That's not in my
Mm.
wheelhouse though. We don't do that kind of thing. But
Mm.
like, go talk to these people. Like, okay, all right. So you're not trying to be all things to all people. Again, you get a lot of credibility for that.
Yeah. There are situations where that relationship perhaps gets taken too far and you only end up doing what customers want you to do. So I know I talk to a lot of product managers, product leaders who are in the situation where, hey, in my company, there is so much force exerted by customers that we only do what customers want us to do. What can
Hmm.
you share in terms of how do product managers and product leaders steer this culture away from just doing what customers want us to do?
Wow, that's a hard one. Yeah, at Bytemobile, I had 2 to 3 customers that were more than half the revenue.
Mm.
I think. I don't know. Certainly they had more than half of the
Yeah.
influence. Cloudera was like a handful, 5 or 10 customers that had so much influence over the company, and like they held you hostage. You'd be
Yeah.
doing a thing because you needed to drive that renewal, knowing full well that the tax was that you were going to lose a portion of the whole market from that.
Yeah.
So I think one big lesson is like you need diversity in your revenue. Like if someone says like, hey,
Mm.
we can go sign up extra large size bank and it's 10 million in revenue, do you want that
Mm.
at that stage of your company? Or would that kind of become indigestion for the company? Next thing you know,
Mm.
you're building something amazing that's going to turn that $10 million account into a $20 million account, but you're going to miss a 500 million opportunity because you're
Yeah.
building something very, very, very custom to that one bank or telco. And I've done both of those things. So one is like you got to have an alignment across your executive team about your go-to-market strategy that says like, hey, like we can always go up market later, but you can't really go down market. It doesn't really work. So let's be conscious of where we're at and let's go as wide as we can, get diversity of your revenue, and then, pick off 1 or 2 or 3, kind of these other ones. But at that point, hopefully they're only a couple percent of your revenue. So that's like one big thing.
Mhm.
Clearly not all in the control of of product management, but
Yeah.
hey, you give it a go. The second thing then is more in control is look, product managers are often like quote unquote the deciders. Like
Mm.
we put in the feature request, Fred said no. What the heck, Fred? Like let me escalate to your boss and see if that person will say yes. And you get into these like escalation, rainbow
Yeah.
escalations. Well, I'll go talk to my boss to talk to your boss and blah 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 blah. Not a helpful kind of scenario. What I like to do in those kinds of scenarios is like, hey, let's take all the good ideas out there. Like we could do this strategic thing, we could do these 2 bespoke customer requests.
Yeah.
I'll usually try to like pick a region. Like so, let's say I got 2 big feature requests from the European sales force to
Mm.
move their customers forward. well, then I'll call a meeting with all of the SE directors and say, hey, let's talk about it. There's these ideas. What do you think we
Yeah.
should do? And 9 times out of 10, SE Director 1 will convince SE Director 2 that we're not doing that feature because it's going to like hurt all of these other things.
Mm.
And in other words, I don't have to say no. Like, I'd like to do this, but that guy won't let me. His
Yeah.
customers need something different from us. Now, at the same time, every once in a while, they'll come back and they're like, yeah, we need that. That's going to make our quarter. And, we have to, I need it. It's like, okay, well, now I got buy-in across a whole bunch of people. And when you can really go through a good process and figure out, like, if you do this one feature, you get X million dollars in revenue, like, there's worse things, right? It's good to know that you've got like this sort of agreement and understanding that this feature will definitely move the business forward. That's not a bad thing to do, but you got to go through the right process, and you got to make sure that you don't get caught in this trap where you're building for a market of 5 or 10 customers and you're going to lose the whole other market because somebody else is coming up behind with a much more flexible, extensible product.
Interesting. Okay. So let's switch gears a little bit and come to your product organization, the team. So, as a chief product officer, what are ways that you just keep a good pulse on people all the way down to the individual contributor in your org?
I don't know. I have every variety of meetings. For the rest of the org, though, I'm a big believer in skip levels,
Okay.
and I do them ideally twice a quarter. And one of them is just, hey, what do you want to talk about? Like, show me your work or ask a question, or it's their meeting more than my meeting, and I'm hoping that they're going to come with some idea that they want to show me and test, or something they want to show me or ask me, or something like this. But the other one, though, I kind of once a quarter, hey, I want you to tell me about last quarter. What did you
Okay.
aim to do? What did you actually do? What kind of misses did you have? What at the end of the quarter did you missed opportunities
Yeah.
effectively? And I want them to do that at 2 elevations. One is kind of like for the business, the projects. Like, I was trying to close these 5 accounts and I closed 4 out of 5 or something like that. The
Okay.
other is for their career. And it's kind of more for them than for me, but I want them to be thinking about their career. Like, what progress did you make in your career? Did you improve your writing? Did you,
Mm.
go meet 3 customers? Did you get out of your comfort zone? And if you got nothing
Mm.
in that quadrant, what are you doing next quarter to fix that? Because you should be working on the business, kind of for the
Mm.
business, but on your career as well. You need to be intentional about planning out, like, I am too insular. I'm spending too much time inside this company. I'm not getting out there. I'm not in the flow of good ideas.
Mm.
Okay, well, I'm going to listen to 42 podcasts next
Mm.
month. Okay, that's fine. I'm not super prescriptive. I just want to make sure that they're also thinking about personal growth and that they own that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to tell you, hey, here's 5 podcasts to listen to, and here's 2 customers, whatever else. Like, I don't have time to do all of that for all of my employees, but they should be doing it, and I'll help them and I'll suggest. And if they ask for, like, hey, I want to do one of these, but I don't know how. Okay, good. Now I know what you're looking for. You kind
Yeah.
of gave me the equivalent of a reverse job description. You need a mentor. I know somebody. This will be a perfect fit. I can kind of help with that introduction. So kind of a look back at the last quarter, look ahead on the next quarter. And then actually one of my favorite things there is it's a 3-slide little simple quarterly conversation deck. The third one then is like, what was the most satisfying experience of the last quarter?
Mm.
And what was the most frustrating experience of the last quarter? And what feedback do you have for me?
Okay.
I always like this one the most because actually I get the most surprises. They've already talked about the more pedestrian kind of projects. I did this, I did that, this demo was cool, and
Yeah.
here's what I heard about it. But then, like, they'll mention something. The most satisfying thing was when someone mentioned my project in the all hands, or like something that comes out of the blue, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't
Interesting.
realize.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have known that was really important. But okay, now I know what motivates this person.
Yeah.
Equally, when they mention the most frustrating thing, a lot of times that's a surprise. Oh, well, now I know what frustrates this person. I'm inside their head. Sometimes it's like nothing to do with work. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so something at home is weighing on them. Like, good to know. I didn't know that. And of course, the feedback, just like, what do you want me to know that maybe I don't know right now? And you
Mm.
hear lots of good things from there as well. So
Okay.
I try to stay close with people. And there's obviously big group meetings, small group meetings, offsites and stuff. But at minimum, like
Yeah.
once a quarter, I don't have product orgs aren't that big, right? I can do a skip level with everyone
Yeah.
at least once, if not twice a quarter. And I like to have that sort of cadence of how's your career going, and am I doing enough to help you on your way? Because while I want you to stay here for a long, 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 long time, at some
Yeah.
point I want you to go off and make me look good, like perfectly
Interesting.
selfishly, I want you to go to be a chief product officer somewhere else, and
Yeah.
they'll look back and like, hey, that Big Panda organization, that was a pretty good product. They turned out a lot of really great people. What more
Yeah.
satisfying thing can you have in your career than that?
Absolutely. Excellent. So, Fred, one word I have heard multiple times, and that seems to be a theme that's emerging to me across everything that you've said, is the word intention or intentionalities. So, tell me about the intentionality that you've had, and is this something that people can learn? How do you become that high intentionality person? If that's even a word, but I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. Um, so I forget when it was, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Actually, I think it was during that C360 process,
Mm,
not C360, that the deep 360 process
right.
that I had gone through at Cloudera. Somebody used that word for the first time. It was like, Fred is one of the most intentional people I know. Witness this 360 he's doing. By the way, like that was not like a thing the company did for everybody. I decided I
Yeah.
want that. I felt like I was kind of stuck in a rut or a slump, and I'm like, I need help. Something's going on. I got to figure this out. And
Mm,
even just that was sort of an expression of that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good description of me actually. So I kind of embraced that term. I might even overemphasize it every
mhm.
once in a while. But I think that's just part of this job is to like, hey, where are you going? What's the plan? To me, writing is a big part of it. Like whatever ideas are floating around your head, like get them out of your head, get them on paper, go argue with yourself before you go waste anybody else's time with a half-baked kind of argument.
Mm,
That's an act of intentionality. I'll go further than that, kind of tying what I just said related to those skip levels and the quarterly kind of cadence there. You know, it's not okay, especially if you're a product manager, but kind of anyone who's like a up and comer kind of leader, it's not
yeah.
okay to not have a roadmap for your career. Like you got like it can be all BS. I'm like, hey, a lot of roadmaps are BS. We're going to solve this problem, then cold fusion, and then after that, we're going to the moon. Okay, at least you got something, you got a
Yeah.
structure there.
Yeah.
But if you can't come up with that, why should I hire you to create a roadmap for my product? Why should you be my engineering leader? Why should you be the person that comes over and takes over my pre-sales plan? You got to come in with a hypothesis and formulate a plan of like, we're going to go here. This is my vision for how this is going to go. If you don't have vision, that's not good. Like now
Mm,
I'm worried that like you won't be able to guide your thing there, you guide whatever function, whatever job that is.
mm,
I think it starts with like, we'll pick a few ideas. Like when specifically, when I was transitioning from Citrix to Cloudera,
mhm.
I had been 3 years in product management and the previous 10 years in engineering roles.
Yeah.
It wasn't obvious to me that I wanted to be in product management for the next job. I thought, well, hey, why don't I go look for a couple of VP of engineering jobs? Maybe that's what I want to
Mm,
go do. So I
okay.
met with a couple of VP of engineering friends and I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I want to do this. Here's my resume. And they quickly were like, this is not a VP of engineers resume. This is a product management strategist kind of resume. If
Mm,
it said VP of engineering, you would say like, hey, I know how to open up an office in Bangalore in 6 months,
mm,
scale it to a team of
right.
50, revamp this, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God, I don't want to do that. Like, that doesn't sound interesting at all. And they're like, cool, then you're not a VP of engineering. I'm like, good to
Yeah.
know. Like, all right, I closed that door at that point. But I
Mm,
didn't know at first. I tried on like, let me look for a little bit of these, a little look there. I have like a couple of hypotheses
yeah.
and then explore them in earnest and then shut them down when you're not. But you got it, like, in other words, you're kind of running an experiment on your own career journey. Like, do I
Yeah.
want to be a CEO? Do I want to go to a large company? Do I want this? Do I want that? Like, don't know. Assume that's what your destination. Go down
Right.
that path for a little while. If it feels great, keep going. If it feels horrible, turn around, go back.
Beautiful advice. Getting those thoughts down on paper and argue with yourself. I think that's really powerful. So you mentioned Crossing the Chasm. What's the latest book that you've read, or maybe even a book that shifted your perspective about something?
Um, wow, lots of different books to call out. We'll stick with Jeffrey Moore here in his
Okay.
series. So he's written, I don't know, 8 or 9 books.
Yeah.
I think the last of which was called Zone to Win.
Zone to Win.
And I've read
Yes.
it 3 times now because it's really spoke to me, but for different moments and different things. And
Right.
so a lot of lessons from that. And, it's one of those books that speaks to you like, oh yeah, I remember that meeting at Citrix. Yeah, I wish I had this book then. I remember that meeting at Cloudera, so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, what a funny coincidence, and I'll get to that. But the other phrase that the book talks about is how portfolio management becomes a crisis in prioritization. And the funny coincidence you mentioned Zone to Win is just recently I hosted an executive briefing with Michael Eckhart, who's the director of Chasm Institute and a close collaborator of Jeffrey Moore. And we talked about the zone management frameworks and how to apply them. So I agree, that's a great book. And, a lot of flashbacks to when you read it and say, I remember that situation in that company. Fred, thank you so much. Such a great conversation. I really appreciate a lot of wisdom, insights that you've shared across your career journey. Thank you so much for being on the show, and wish you all the best.
My pleasure, Rahul. I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you to yourself and to your audience. Really appreciated the time.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps the podcast to reach more listeners. You can subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, and you can find all past episodes at productleadersjourney.com. See you again soon.